Okay, so let's dive in. Imagine, right? Imagine discovering that the very foundations of how you see the world,
Uh-huh.
from ancient history right up to your latest tech gadget,
Mm-hmm.
are actually built on layers of illusion. Yeah,
Wow.
that's the pretty extraordinary journey we're embarking on today. We're diving deep into this really, well, mind-bending assertion. Nothing is as it appears.
And what's really profound about this concept is that it's more than just, philosophical idea.
Right.
The source material we're digging into, it comes from a lifetime of observation, and it suggests this um, pervasive human hubris.
Hubris, like arrogance.
Exactly, this arrogant belief that we're somehow at the absolute peak of knowledge. And this delusion, the source argues, it actually blinds us to a profound hidden truth.
Right.
Kind of like an iceberg, right?
Okay.
And it's actively concealed by things like gaslighting, distractions, and these justifications we conjure up. So for you listening, this deep dive is maybe a shortcut to recognizing those unseen mechanisms really at play.
So our mission today, then, is to explore this great deception, but through the unique lens of one individual's, like, radical awakening.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to trace a path from their own personal disillusionment all the way to a huge reevaluation of, well, everything.
Mm-hmm.
History, economics, geopolitics, tech, even the spiritual side.
Yeah.
We're basically going to peel back the layers, see what truth emerges when, everything you thought you knew just kind of fades away.
So where does something like that even start?
Well, for the author of our source material, their story kicks off with a childhood that was steeped in natural freedom.
Yeah.
Largely unsupervised, deeply connected to the untamed world.
Okay.
And they suggest this upbringing gave them an uncorrupted lens, like a baseline for understanding real cause and effect, not mediated by screens or narratives.
That makes sense. That uncorrupted lens, it sounds like it was really formative.
Yeah.
It allowed for these early, almost intuitive insights into technology, even when it was just starting out. The observation was pretty striking. Code just amplifies intention, meaning just a few lines of instruction could suddenly wield this immense scalable power. And even back then, machines were starting to infer meaning from data, recognizing patterns that, frankly, human minds often miss.
A capability that held incredible promise,
Yeah.
but also maybe a shadow.
Exactly. And those shadows, they became much clearer with some, well, pretty brutal awakenings later on.
Like the 2008 financial crash.
Precisely. That wasn't just, economic turbulence for this individual. It vividly exposed what they call rigged job markets and just systemic manipulation everywhere.
And their consulting job didn't help.
Apparently not. Consulting, often seen as this path to real impact, right? It felt more like a Shark Tank, where finding actual solutions was way less important than competitive posturing.
Ooh.
Yeah. So this deep disillusionment with the corporate world, it became a really powerful catalyst for them.
And it wasn't just the economy, was it?
No, beyond that, there were these broader cultural observations. Looking across continents, they saw this pervasive decay of traditions. Well, vibrant customs, community bonds, that wisdom passed down through generations.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to be eroding, replaced by this more superficial kind of homogenized culture.
Oh, okay.
And this clarity, seeing all this decay, while it was insightful, it came with a really heavy burden.
Loneliness.
Yeah, profound loneliness. Seeing beyond the illusions made it genuinely difficult to fit in with a society that seemed, pretty content with its blinders on.
So when someone sees the world like that,
Yeah.
with such, I guess, unsettling clarity,
Yeah.
what do they even do?
Well, the author talks about trying an opt-out strategy. They actually bought a sailboat.
Ah, the dream of escape.
Right. Seeking personal sovereignty, self-reliance, hoping to just escape the system's reach entirely.
There's always a but.
There's always the but. This is where the story gets fascinating. Even that proved illusory.
Wow.
Global events, like the COVID-19 pandemic, showed just how far the system's tendrils reached. It impacted travel, commerce, personal liberty, even out on the open sea. It ultimately proved that, well, no true escape was possible.
Wow. Okay, so personal disillusionment, escape attempt, failed. Where does the lens turn next?
It zooms out, way out, as if those personal things weren't enough. The material directly confronts what it calls humanity's foundational hubris.
Is that arrogance again?
Exactly. Yeah. The belief that our modern advancements represent this unbroken straight line upwards. Linear progress.
Right.
And this self-congratulatory view, it argues, actively blinds us to a huge amount of lost historical knowledge.
Okay, so what kind of lost knowledge are we talking about?
Well, it's compelling how the source uses specific examples, like take the Antikythera
Oh
mechanism.
yeah, the ancient Greek computer thing.
Right, an analog computer from around, 200 to 100 BC, designed to predict astronomical positions, eclipses, with incredibly intricate gearing.
Uh-huh.
The level of mechanical sophistication was just astonishingly unmatched until, the 20th century. That find alone forces you to reassess what ancient cultures could do.
Okay, that's one. What else?
Then you've got the pyramids of Giza. Our source really focuses on the Great Pyramid's massive casing stones.
The outer layer.
Yeah. These were cut and fitted with this mirrored perfection and precision, so exact, it says, that a razor blade cannot be inserted between them, even over huge surfaces.
Okay, wait. How is that even possible without modern tools? That scale?
That's the question. It profoundly challenges the conventional theories about how they were built.
Right?
And it's not just Egypt. Look at the polygonal masonry in Peru. Sites like Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo.
Those massive interlocking stones.
Exactly. Enormous multi-ton stones cut with these complex, weird angles, fitting together perfectly without any mortar. And they're earthquake resistant.
Again, the question is how? How did they achieve that mirrored perfection without, laser cutters and cranes?
Precisely. The source compels us to ask that question.
So if these ancient marvels just defy our current understanding, what does that say about our supposed intellectual superiority today?
Well, the source offers a pretty sharp critique of modern specialized academia.
How so?
It argues that focusing only on these minute fragments, hyper-specializing, often means we miss the big picture, the holistic understanding.
Like seeing the trees but not the forest.
Kind of. And this hyperspecialization, it suggests, leads to theories that just fall short when tested against reality. They expose the limits of our understanding, not necessarily the primitiveness of the ancients.
Okay, so the big takeaway here is that progress isn't necessarily this straight line up.
Not at all. And nothing is as it appears, especially when it comes to our own assumed intellectual peak.
All right, let's shift gears then. From ancient mysteries to something very modern. Economics, specifically manufacturing. The source talks about the folly of reshoring. What's that about?
Yeah, it basically argues that the whole idea of bringing manufacturing back is often an illusion.
Why? Because of automation.
Largely, yes. Modern factories are increasingly dark factories, highly automated, minimal human labor needed. So even if the assembly lines for complex stuff came back, that whole ecosystem of related jobs, it just wouldn't follow in the same way we might imagine.
Okay, so the jobs aren't coming back in the same way. What else makes it a folly?
Well, just the sheer impracticality of rebuilding these incredibly complex global supply chains from scratch. It's daunting, maybe impossible in the short term.
Like what?
Think about raw materials. Setting up the mining operations needed can take decades. And cutting-edge chip fabrication plants like that TSMC one in Arizona everyone talks about, immense investment, huge amounts of time just to break ground, let alone get it running.
So you can't just flip a switch and reverse decades of globalization.
Yeah, exactly. You just can't.
And this highlights a pretty stark contrast, doesn't it, between the West and, say, China?
Absolutely. The source points to Western just-in-time fragility, lean, globally dispersed chains focused on cost versus China's strategic vertical integration.
Meaning they control more of the process.
Yeah, they've systematically built control over basically every stage, from raw materials to final assembly in so many critical industries. And this creates what the source calls a double whammy of dependency for the West.
We depend on them for the stuff, and they control how it's made.
Pretty much. And this strategic difference is deeply reflected in China's accelerating rise in future industries. We're talking AI, quantum computing, renewable energy manufacturing.
They're also publishing more scientific papers, getting more patents.
Right. And one really stark example the source points out is shipping. China's dominance in the shipping industry versus the huge decline in the U.S.
Control over logistics, ports, shipbuilding.
It gives them immense economic and geopolitical leverage. Leverage that, frankly, Western nations have largely ceded.
Okay, let's unpack another critical layer of illusion. Money itself. The source really goes after Keynesian economics.
Yeah, the argument is that this long dominant framework, the idea governments manage economies through spending and taxes, has basically run its course.
Hating to.
Unsustainable national debt and what it calls artificial market conditions. There's this palpable fear, it suggests, around what comes next.
And what does it suggest comes next?
Well, specifically, the fear is around modern monetary theory, or MMT, described as a scarily ambiguous and untested theory.
Right. MMT, the idea that governments controlling their own currency can just print money for spending as long as inflation is managed.
Basically, yeah. A truly radical departure from how we usually think about economics.
And this distrust, this fear,
Mm-hmm.
it fuels something else the source talks about, right? A youthful awakening.
Exactly. This widespread distrust is fueling a strategic shift, especially among younger people, towards neutral reserve assets, things like gold and, increasingly, Bitcoin.
Why? Because traditional paths are broken.
That's the argument. Traditional paths to wealth, like owning a home, are seen as out of reach or maybe just an illusion of ownership because of the massive debt and rising taxes involved.
And even gold isn't perfect.
The source argues it's manipulated and also hypothecated, meaning the same gold might be pledged or lent out multiple times, creating this potential illusion of more supply than actually exists.
So if traditional money and even gold are flawed,
Hmm.
what's the answer according to this material?
It presents a very clear, almost stark thesis. Fix the money, fix the world.
Okay. And how do we fix the money?
It argues that Bitcoin does fix the money.
How so?
By offering decentralization, a fixed supply, that hard cap of 21 million units, and censorship resistance. These are seen as hallmarks of sound money, acting as what it calls a proven life raft.
And central bank, digital currencies, CBDCs, they don't fix it.
The argument is they absolutely do not fix the money. Instead, they're described as a dangerous progression towards a dystopian vision.
Why dangerous?
Because they enable unprecedented centralized control, programmability like money with expiration dates, or restrictions on what you can buy, and just pervasive surveillance. It fundamentally shifts power from the individual straight to the state.
But this leads to a strange situation, right? Bitcoin's been around, it's called a life raft yet.
Yeah,
Not everyone's using it.
exactly. The source points out this intriguing paradox: minimal retail adoption among the general public.
Why is that? The source says.
It attributes it to what it calls fist blinders, the convenience trap we talked about, and maybe even active suppression.
But institutions are adopting it.
Yes. And that's the powerful counterpoint. Growing and significant actual institutional adoption. We're talking Bitcoin ETFs, public companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets, actions that are actually reducing the publicly available supply pretty quickly.
So for individuals, especially young people facing this tough economic future, what's the message?
The source posits that acquiring even one Bitcoin should be the new retirement plan.
Seriously, one Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's framed as an astronomical opportunity, an asymmetric bet.
Meaning low downside, high upside.
Potentially, yes. Much, much more favorable odds, it argues, given its potential growth versus the perceived decline of traditional fiat currencies. It represents a manageable potential loss against the chance for, well, unprecedented financial sovereignty.
Okay, shifting gears again, let's look at the geopolitical chessboard. The source talks about hidden drivers behind global conflicts.
Right. The argument is that these conflicts, they're rarely about the reasons we're told. They're propelled by a hidden continuity of agenda.
I'm agenda about what?
Things like control over global trade routes, maintaining the U.S. dollar status as the world reserve currency, managing the rise of powerful blocs like BRICS,
How's the public?
is largely kept blind, it claims, fed simpler, more emotionally charged explanations. This hidden agenda, it suggests, is pushed forward using a strategy of divide and conquer.
And Europe gets mentioned specifically.
Yeah, it's quite thought-provoking how the source views Europe's perceived self-destruction.
Meaning things like Nord Stream.
Exactly. Events like the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage, German deindustrialization, mass immigration, these are seen not as accidents, but as consequences of nations losing sovereignty to external interests and unrepresentative leaders, decisions that actively undermine national stability.
The source also talks about hypocrisy.
It does. It highlights what it calls the striking hypocrisy of Western accusations. For example, charging China with debt trap diplomacy is presented as basically a confession of historical Western practices, pointing to institutions like the IMF and World Bank, which have arguably imposed similar economic dependencies for decades through their own lending and aid conditions.
And other Western tools are mentioned.
Indeed, things like USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, Voice of America, VOA, various NGOs.
Okay.
While they're outwardly promoting democracy, critics cited by the material argue they can actually lead to imposed austerity, influencing elections, fostering unrest, and generally serving as geopolitical leverage. It even references terms like economic hitman operations and love bombs aimed at local elites.
Wow. And this connects to things like Agenda 2030.
Yes, that thread continues with the UN's documented Agenda 2030 and ESG frameworks, environmental, social, governance.
How are those viewed?
The source sees them not just as suggestions, but as top-down global governance blueprints, designed to centralize power, bypass democratic accountability, and exert control through metrics, further eroding national and individual sovereignty.
So all of this leads to what? A high-stakes game.
Exactly. The source claims it culminates in what it describes as an all-or-nothing game, a final stretch with really existential zero-sum outcomes.
Can you give examples from the source?
Sure. To quote directly, it states, "If BRICS wins, the dollar loses." It also provocatively suggests, and again, it's crucial for you listening to understand, this is a highly controversial viewpoint presented by the source, not our endorsement. If Israel dies, the Middle East stabilizes.
Okay, noted. Very controversial.
Absolutely. The source also asserts if China wins, America loses. And maybe most starkly, if dollar loses reserve status, we go the way of Zimbabwe. Pretty dire warnings.
Okay, let's transition to the digital realm now, which our source calls a failed experiment. That's strong.
It is strong. The internet, initially promised as this tool for liberation, has, in this view, morphed into a pervasive mechanism of control.
And the insidious part is?
Convenience. Convenience is identified as the Trojan horse. The source actually calls it the essence of evil dressed as convenience.
Wow. How does that play out?
Well, think about the padlock icon you see everywhere online.
Yeah, the little security lock.
Right. It fosters this false sense of security, right?
Right.
It lulls users into feeling safe, providing sensitive data, but all that data just fuels this massive advertising engine.
Okay.
And this, the source says, was the ultimate bait and switch. You get free services in exchange for your data and attention, which then became free fuel for nascent AI models.
So we basically trained our own replacements.
That's the chilling reality outlined. We became unwitting architects of our own obsolescence. Every text, every voice command, click, photo upload, search query, behavioral pattern. We were unknowingly training the very AI models that would eventually automate tasks previously performed by humans. Our uncompensated data became the free fuel for algorithms that now, potentially, threaten to hollow out the middle class.
Is there a specific example of this?
Yeah, the author vividly describes setting up a new personal computer. Coming from a background of building PCs from scratch, they were shocked.
Why what?
A new Microsoft laptop required an internet connection and an online account just to install the OS. It defaulted to opted-in tracking and data sharing, buried in menus. It pushed biometrics like windows below. It even automatically uploaded BitLocker encryption keys to the Microsoft cloud.
So the computer itself is tracking you?
In the source's view, yes. The computer, once a private tool, is now designed as a highly sophisticated tracking mechanism, and it's completely opaque to the normal consumer.
So what are the broader implications here, beyond tracking?
The source warns that AI looks set to significantly hollow out the middle class, potentially creating this society split between, like, janitors and CEOs.
Like nobody's warning us.
There's a glaring lack of what it calls flagmen for AI, voices really sounding the alarm about the dangers. It also points out the hypocrisy around energy use. The immense demands of AI data centers are often ignored, while technologies like Bitcoin get demonized for their energy consumption. And it raises these profound moral dilemmas. Are we prioritizing algorithms for comfort and entertainment over using that same power for critical issues, like accelerating cancer research?
So beneath all these illusions, economic, geopolitical, tech coercion, there's something deeper going wrong.
That's what the source asserts, a profound underlying spiritual decay. A crisis where, quote, what was once good is now evil.
How does that manifest?
Well, a key aspect discussed is the dilution of traditional faiths. Using Christianity as an example, the material suggests tenets get reinterpreted, historical context gets ignored, and the emphasis shifts to comfort and expediency over maybe deeper, more challenging truths. This leads, it argues, to a shallow, ahistorical understanding of ancient wisdom, stripping it of its real power.
And this spiritual drift.
Yeah.
It's dangerous.
According to the source, yes. It presents an existential danger. Without a strong moral compass, with fundamental values inverted, society becomes incredibly susceptible to manipulation, fragmentation, and ultimately self-destruction. The deepest blinders of humanity, it suggests, are profoundly spiritual, and they foster this pervasive void.
And what's the cumulative effect of all this? The hubris, the illusions, the decay.
Our source uses a stark metaphor: mountains of cans.
Kick down the road.
Exactly. Previous generations, it argues, have just kept kicking the can down the road on massive issues: debt, climate change, pollution, crumbling infrastructure, economic precarity. And now, the stark reality is there is no more road.
And who inherits these mountains?
The youth. They're depicted as feeling, frankly, robbed by the baby boomers, inheriting crippling financial instability, pressing environmental crises, and this digital landscape designed basically for their commodification.
So their future looks...
Their working lives, if things don't change, risk being reduced to just trash collectors and disposal for all these accumulated problems. Upward mobility, the source contends, becomes a cruel illusion.
And this slow decline? It can suddenly accelerate.
That's the warning. This gradual buildup of unresolved problems pushes the system from a slowly deteriorating state to the edge of a suddenly catastrophic failure.
Like a financial collapse.
Yeah, it likens it to the sudden collapse of empires built on illusions, think Bernie Madoff or Sam Bankman-Fried, where the real rot is only revealed when the crisis finally hits.
Okay, that's pretty bleak. Is there any hope in this picture?
Actually, yes. Amidst this bleak inheritance, our source points to a profound hope, and it illuminates this using the fourth turning theory.
Strauss and Howe, the generational cycles idea.
Exactly. For those unfamiliar, the theory suggests history moves in these recurring cycles, and that periods of profound crisis, like the one being described, they aren't just destructive.
They're necessary.
They're necessary to forge a new consciousness, to radically restructure entire societies. It sets the stage for a completely new beginning. It's a theory of cyclical renewal that actually comes from the upheaval.
Okay, so crisis can lead to rebirth. What indicates we might be in such a turning point?
Well, a powerful indicator cited comes from an unlikely place: social media executives themselves.
How so?
Our source notes that many who built these platforms won't let their own children use the tools they created.
Wow.
Because they know the profound psychological, developmental, and privacy costs. They know about that evil dressed as convenience. This insider knowledge, the source argues, is a powerful testament to the blinders that others willingly wear.
So the people who made it know it's harmful.
Right. And this insight, combined with those crushing mountains of cans the next generations are inheriting, it could catalyze the only real hope identified: an awakening. A collective refusal to participate.
A refusal to participate in what?
In being the product. A conscious decision by the next generations to reject having their data and attention harvested. And this rebellion, it's informed by a totally redefined understanding of intelligence.
What kind of intelligence?
It includes understanding the geopolitical and economic chessboard, realizing how little you actually know about the unseen gears, and actively asking questions, seeking out deliberately hidden information about global agendas, colonialism, military expansionism, that continuity of agenda we talked about.
Has this kind of youth passion been seen before?
Well, historically, it's often been redirected, right? Think Woodstock. But our material points to modern examples of what it sees as authentic despair, Occupy Wall Street, maybe the pro-Palestine movements on campuses, even though they're often vilified.
And this is contrasted with
what it calls manufactured outrage, movements that get co-opted or amplified specifically for divide and conquer. It mentions aspects of the George Floyd protests as Antifa. It's critical of cynical politicians who rile the passions on issues they previously railed against.
But genuine connection can still happen, even online.
Absolutely. Despite the manipulation, moments emerge. The source describes the red dot social app movement, referring to platforms like TikTok or Douyin, as a kind of modern Woodstock moment, fostering a real cross-cultural exchange. It talks about Americans learning ni hao, sharing daily lives directly with people in, say, China-perceived enemies, describing it as organic and beautiful.
So it cuts through the propaganda.
Yeah, it allowed Chinese youth to see unfiltered aspects of U.S. homelessness, poverty, anger, lack of health care, letting them appreciate their own societal order and safety. It pierced the manufactured images on both sides.
And what's the realization that comes from this?
An empowering one. The digital world, despite its current hold on us, is ultimately just a blip on the radar, a failed experiment, and understanding that Everything is feasible, but who's going to pay and will it be allowed? That gives a clear target for this collective refusal. It's a path for youth to opt out of being the product.
So we've talked about geopolitical games, illusions. What's the deepest moral burden identified in the source?
It speaks of a profound stain on our conscience, a perceived inherent evil in the very system or the nation that claims moral authority, where, again, what was once good is now evil.
Can you elaborate on that? How is it seen?
One way is through what the source calls the selective application of principles. It puts it starkly. Never again only meant if we like you.
Implying moral imperatives are applied based on convenience.
That's the argument, that the duty to prevent atrocities is applied selectively based on geopolitical alliances or interests. It also points out a kind of Western, particularly U.S. privilege. Our concerns are not what others in virtually most of the world experience.
The idea of self-determination is challenged, too.
Definitely. Despite claims of sovereign equality, the material contends that our value is not determined by foreign chess players. And even for our strongest allies, their national identity, their sovereignty is often shaped through the political structures of the dominant power.
It points to history.
Yeah, the historical precedent of borders redrawn by the West all over the world, denying true self-determination to many nations for centuries.
Okay, but what's the most unsettling aspect of this moral stain?
It's what our source calls the paradoxical inversion of good and evil.
How does that work?
From the perspective of someone who's had this awakening, nations conventionally labeled evil sometimes appear to embody fundamental societal goods, things like strong family values, comprehensive social safety nets, maybe societal harmony.
While the good West shows decay.
Conversely, yes, the conventionally good Western system is perceived to exhibit profound decay. Fabricated outrage, a disjointed society, crumbling infrastructure, aggressive military expansionism. This profound moral dissonance, the source argues, is only really visible once you take off the blinders.
Wow. Okay, despite this often really bleak picture, you mentioned a silver lining.
Yes, absolutely. A profound one emerges, particularly looking at AI's limitations and the potential for a human reevaluation. The prospect is described as bleak but doable, but it taps into our resilience.
Where does the optimism come from?
Largely from what AI cannot do. The source predicts a powerful resurgence of the intangible.
Like?
Love, emotion, genuine care, ethical decision-making. These irreplaceable human qualities will become paramount, it argues, especially in a world getting saturated with synthetic interactions and automation.
And a return to tangible skills, too.
Yes. A reemergence of the tangible, things like dexterity, blue-collar work, trade school skills involving adaptable problem-solving, intuitive understanding, fine motor skills that robots still really struggle with.
Makes sense.
And also a renewed emphasis on home economics.
Home economics? Serious?
Yeah, but think broader.
Yeah.
Sustainable living skills, managing resources, cooking from scratch, preserving food, repairing things, gardening. These practical skills, it argues, build robust individuals and robust communities from the ground up.
So the idea is that AI, by pushing us to the brink,
might inadvertently force a rediscovery and reprioritization of what it truly means to be human.
a path to realigning our values.
Exactly, a fundamental realignment of societal values. But there's that crucial question the source poses. Will it be allowed?
Highlighting the potential barriers.
Immense, almost insurmountable barriers to this kind of positive future actually unfolding.
And Bitcoin comes back into this picture.
Yes, to navigate this challenging landscape, the material reiterates Bitcoin's role as a potent alternative. Again, pointing out minimal retail adoption, but significant and growing exponentially institutional adoption, the ETFs, the treasury strategies shrinking that public float.
So for young people, it's still that asymmetric bet.
Yes, the source repeats. Acquiring even one Bitcoin should be the new retirement plan. An astronomical opportunity, an asymmetric bet with much, much more favorable odds. It's framed as a manageable potential loss versus the chance for real financial sovereignty, a hedge against fiat decline, an individual act of, well, quiet rebellion.
This whole journey into truth, seen behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It sounds liberating, but also costly.
Definitely. The source acknowledges the cost of truth. Facing uncomfortable realities, bearing that burden of clarity. It often leads to loneliness. echoing King Solomon's disillusionment.
Right.
It connects to what thinkers like C.S. Lewis called costly grace, the idea that profound truth or deep faith isn't easy. It demands immense personal sacrifice, radical transformation, not just passive acceptance.
And the source believes people choose not to see.
Ultimately, yes. The conclusion is that the blinders of humanity are by choice. People often cling to convenience and illusion, not just out of ignorance, but from a deep preference for comfort over confronting painful realities.
But clarity can lead to action.
It can lead to a powerful response, a quiet rebellion,
Meaning?
a refusal to diminish yourself, your thinking, your values, just to fit in. It's an internal revolution first, a commitment to living authentically, even if you feel alone.
But it could become collective.
While it often starts individually, it holds the potential for that broader, collective refusal to be the product, which could genuinely spark that fourth turning renewal. It echoes the author's realization from Sailing.
What was that realization?
Quote, "You never know how insignificant you are until you are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and how little the matters of the world actually matter."